All right, welcome to another episode of Out from the Cube. I am George Evjen, and we have a guest, a special guest, actually. I dropped, a teaser? I dropped some teasers in episode last week, and our guest is Keith Rogers, who's a friend of mine that I've worked with for, I guess, the 3 years I've been at Polaris Solutions, and Keith and I have been engaged on a couple projects together. But the teaser was, I reached out to Keith maybe last Tuesday or Wednesday of last week, and we ended up talking for 20 or 30 minutes, really about the series that we're doing. We're in the middle of a series called The Athletics of Software, and I think we're on part 6, or we have finished part 6. And I just wanted to bounce some ideas off of Keith, and we had a conversation kind of about that, because Keith does have kind of an interest in athletics as well. And so we talked, and then when I got off the next day, or maybe it was the same day, I ended up doing a podcast to cover the 6th pillar, or the 6th bullet point of the athletics of software. And as I started talking, I actually was talking about Keith and wound up talking for 40 minutes about Keith, but really kind of an experience or an engagement and a conversation that we had with one another. And so I never really got to the 6th pillar until the next day or so, but we have recorded that. So I mentioned in that episode that we would have Keith on Monday, and I was excited about that. And I do want to actually kind of acknowledge Keith on some things as we get going here, because I don't know, you do listen to the podcast, right, Keith?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you listen to that episode where I was talking about you? I don't know if you have.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Okay.
I wanted to make sure I knew what I was getting myself into.
Oh, okay. So Keith, I mean, for people that don't know you, I'll let you kind of give the thing, your background and where you're at and all that. But Keith works for Polaris Solutions and has been, you were definitely in the top 10 in terms of hires, right? In terms of the first to kind of be brought on board with Polaris Solutions.
Yeah, there's some technicalities there that was probably around number 2 or 3, something like that. Yeah.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, I've been in consulting for basically, I think, 15 years now or so. And so the guys who started up Polaris knew me from reputation and kind of brought me on to help out. And so, I mean, I've just been working with clients basically since I've been with Polaris, trying to help them solve their software delivery problems. I mean, technically my title is like a managing consultant, but I really think of myself as a developer. And as I get more and more sort of immersed in Agile and just thinking about software development in terms of delivery, I feel like for me, in the sense that I'm a developer, I also feel like it's more about being a deliverer, I guess. Like, there's different types of developers out there, but I think that there are only a subset that are just totally focused on the actual delivery aspects of software. And that has really been the motivation for me, probably in the last couple of years, is trying to combine my development knowledge with my Agile knowledge to try and just really smash deadlines and deliver software in a way that people don't expect. So it's gotten more and more exciting for me, I think, as I've progressed through the career.
Yeah. So this is not for those that are listening, and we appreciate the support and the people that do listen to the podcast. It's been flattering in many regards, the people and the feedback that we do receive. We didn't bring Keith on because he works for Polaris or to push an agenda with Polaris at all. We brought Keith on really because I love having conversations with Keith. I mean, I guess I would start there. One, I really enjoy the conversations that I've had with Keith. I work in our St. Louis office. Keith is in the Chicago office. We've really only had 1 or 2 clients where we've worked together. And I've really enjoyed those, and I've enjoyed our conversations. The first time I remember talking with Keith on the phone was with a client maybe a year and a half or so ago. Was the spring probably of 2018. And we talked, and we had this great back and forth going. And I was learning a lot and taking a lot from it. And I think at that point I asked him, I was like, hey, would you want to ever be on the podcast? Because I'm really enjoying this, and I think people would have a lot to take away with it. And anyway, so 20 or so months later, 16 or so months later, we're having that opportunity. So we not pushing a Polaris agenda at all. But I want to circle back, though, real quick to the podcast, if people haven't listened to it, because it's one of these things that I really kind of want to start with that one. I just kind of want to acknowledge you for it. The podcast that I released maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago was I started just talking about you and our conversation, how much I enjoyed the conversation that I had with you last week. But I ended up talking about a conversation you and I had maybe 5 or 6 months ago. And it was out of the blue. So here's kind of the background of this. You know, Keith and I worked together on a project, and he was kind of one of the lead developers, if not the lead developer. We may not have even had titles for that, but he was one of the primary developers for this product. And I was kind of a facilitator of some ceremonies and some meetings, and kind of what is labeled a product owner. I was supposed to know a lot about the product and then kind of drive work to the development team is essentially it. And through that experience, you know, Keith just randomly, 4 to 6 months ago, pinged me on our Slack channel, and that's how we talk to each other internally with Polaris, and just said, hey, do you have some time to talk? And I got on that call with him, and Keith immediately started giving me some praise on that experience of us working on that project together. So it was unsolicited. I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't asking for it. And Keith just kind of went out of his way to say, you know, this you impacted me this way, and I wanted to acknowledge you for it. And so that's kind of what happened. And the point of the podcast that I released a couple days ago was essentially this: if you've been in a company or on a team for a while, and you're looked at as a senior person, whatever that is, and you have new people or people that aren't as talented or whatever it might be, those people look up to you. And I'm guessing I'm older than Keith. But age doesn't really matter. Like, I look up to Keith a lot because of his expertise, because of how professional he is and how valuable he is and how he includes people, and the juice that he has at Polaris, and the passion he has for our clients, like all that. I just naturally look up to him. And so for him to reach out to me to give me some juice and to give me some feedback and to make me feel good about what I'm doing, and having that be unsolicited, you have no idea how much weight that carries for your team, company, program, basketball team, whatever it is, right? It just carries so much weight. And I made the comment in there that I'm still kind of riding that wave of that phone call 6 months later. And the purpose of that podcast was to get people to think about things that way. And I think I actually put a challenge out to the people listening, like, go have those conversations. Go try to have that level of impact on somebody in your company that day. And I guess that's a long story, but I think it's a great story, and it's exactly how I wanted to start this podcast with you, Keith. One, because just to acknowledge you for it and how much I appreciated that. And two, like, you asked me an interesting question. You asked me on that phone call, your question to me was, you felt I was kind of bringing some juice to the team, whatever that is, right? And your question to me was, how did you do that, or did you think about it, or whatever it is? And so I guess I'm going to pivot the question back to you. Why did you make that phone call to me? Was that something like, do you do that is that something like you think about in terms of team development or leadership, or was it just as simple as, I want George's opinion, or I want to make George feel well? Like, what was kind of the motive behind that call, and why you made it?
Well, it's funny. Do you mind if I kind of dig into what the feedback was for you at all? Okay. No. So when we were on a team together very early on in the project, we were all together. Like, everybody was still kind of new and trying to become a team and trying to establish ourselves as a team. And you had said something to the effect of, this is your guys' project. This is people are looking at you, and this is yours to deliver, which is in software, it doesn't always work like that. A lot of times it'll be a project manager or somebody else who comes and sort of tells you what to do, not say the weight of this thing is on your shoulders. And a lot of times they don't do that because they don't want to give. I don't know why. I don't know why they don't. But there's a kind of motivation, and for the right kind of people for our group, I felt like there were bold steps that I took on that project that I don't think I would have taken had someone not said, like, this is on you to make the moves. Like, this is your arena. This is your court to play on. And I think I hadn't realized, I don't think I realized the value of that statement until I rolled off that project a couple months later, and I was sitting down with a completely green team, and there wasn't anybody saying what you said to the team. And so I just decided, like, look, guys, this is on us to do. And I just repeated exactly what you said to us. And the look on their faces it was almost like they were ready to enter some new world. Like, they just looked like different employees, and the way that they started to engage each other on the project, and the way that the rest of the company started to see the way that we were working, it just became sort of infectious. And all we did was took control of something that only we could do. And I feel like, and so to answer your question more directly, sorry, the short answer to your question is that I think that reflecting on such a like simple statement, like a sentence that had these repercussions of success on my later team. And then I think I had other conversations with other people who are interested in doing team delivery. And I kind of blurted out one day that, like, George had done this thing. And then, I don't know, I just realized, like, if I'm going to be talking about some great thing that you did, that you should hear about it. And so that's when I reached out to you and said, like, you did this thing that just people don't do. And it's something that when I think, I mean, I don't know if you remember how you responded to me, but you said something to the effect of, like, oh, that's just what I do because it's like coaching. But it's like, not everybody has this coaching mentality, this wanting to make the team itself better.
Yeah.
And I think that it's something we assume that companies and organizations do that, but I don't know that it's always true. So it's one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of talking about coaching.
No,
Go ahead.
You say something. I mean, the big pillar for what I hear you saying, and I appreciate the fact that you feel you got it from me. You didn't get the idea from me, but that I empowered you to kind of feel this way. Is the word that is popping into my head is ownership, right? And this idea of, I think I feel that a lot in the software world. Like, these elite software guys want to feel like they own it. Like, we've talked about, one part of the business doing the what and why, and then the development team kind of doing the how, and that they own it, kind of soup to nuts. And I think that is not just software. I think it's athletics. I think it's business. I think it's executives. I think it's people that sell. Like, hey, you tell me what and why we're doing something, and I will go implement a strategy that I feel is appropriate, and I'll knock it out of the park. Like, you give me that, you empower me with that. You give me the autonomy, and I feel, and the ownership of it, I'll execute it. That's kind of what I feel that you're saying, and I don't think it's just software. I think I guess two questions. One, you said you don't see that much, and now we're speaking in the software world. Why is that so hard, you think, for leaders to give that, to make a team feel like they own things, that they own the product, the service, the selling of shoes or cars or whatever? Like, man, own it. Like, come up with a strategy, a solution, a tactic, and you own it, and I'll support you.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a complicated. I think it's a complicated response. But I'll speak to my experiences, and I think that sometimes there's a trust issue, right? Like, sometimes there are the people who are being asked to produce a solution or deliver the solution are not people that are capable of actually delivering it. So they then have to ask somebody else to do that work. And when they ask them to do that work, there's this anxiety of, is this person that I'm asking to do this work, do they want to deliver this thing as much as I do? Because I'm the one who's on the line. My name is on the project. But because the person whose name is on the project is not the person who's delivering, they now have to trust this team to do it. But then when that manager is trying to establish that trust, they don't actually hand it over completely to the team. Because if you hand it all the way over to the team, now you as a manager are no longer in control. So I think that, like, the only way you have to be able to let go of control and give it completely to the team and make them feel that they have control over it. And I think a lot of people just don't want to let go of that. because they know that they're on the line. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How hard is it to kind of be on that seesaw of giving you complete ownership to execute a solution that you feel is appropriate, and for me to continue to stay engaged and kind of navigate the ship still a little bit? Like and I think it is a trust thing. It's you and me working together, and me knowing, hey, Keith knows what he's doing more than I do, but I know what's going on another end that he may not know about. So there's, some communication and trust, but I do feel like that is without question a big balancing act between, the people that are both people are, in control, or want to be in control and want to kind of have their strategies implemented. It is a balancing act, right?
Right. Oh, for sure. I think that is, it's complicated in the sense that trust is not just established once and forever there. It comes and goes. It's like sometimes you build trust and sometimes you lose trust. And I think that, the reason there's like that whole back and forth is all hinges on communication that has to happen. And I think that's part of this conversation. It's like, if you're gonna try and give control to the team, you need to know that they can completely do it. But you also need to keep checking in and making sure that they're going down the direction you want them to go. I think that you see in athletics, you see that with the coaching and the team's relationship. The coach is right there. They're standing like feet from the team. They can't go onto the court and start playing, obviously, but they're right there. And if a player looks over, they're right there. And there's a lot of managers who aren't right there. They're, they want to communicate in a way that isn't close. And so then all of a sudden, there starts to be this disconnect between what the team thinks is important and what their, managers or other people who are sort of held accountable for the project start to distance themselves. And at least what I've seen in projects is the closer these guys are working together and the more they're communicating and the more they're arguing in a positive sense,
right.
Like engaging in valuable conflict and constantly demonstrating to one another that they both care about where this thing is going. And even if one person's ideas seem like they're going in a different direction, they're right there with each other to hash it out.
Yeah. One thing I do admire about you, and I wish I had more of this in my DNA. There's a Jason Wells, who's a recurring guest of ours, typically on Wednesdays. It's been a little spotty with the summer because of his commitments. One thing I admire about Coach Jason is, and we actually did an episode on this, was about conflict and confrontation. I think was more the word than it was conflict, but just confrontation, like kind of getting into somebody and getting loud. And I've been in situations with Coach Jason where I've seen him do that. And actually his comment was, I am comfortable talking like this, is what he said. Like, I can do this. That resonated with me because I remember sitting there with that particular incident going, I'm not comfortable talking like this. Right. But what I admire that a lot about him. I admire that a ton about him. Because he's not afraid of it, and you are very similar in that. Like, you are not afraid of conflict, right?
No, I yeah, I have some conflict for sure. I like getting into conflict, and actually I like experiencing that moment where I'm forced to exercise self-control because I get revved up in arguments. I get emotional, and I owe a lot to the people who are willing to sit there, be patient, listen, and come back at me. Sometimes they come back to me with equal levels. I have to be like, okay, I have to cool down and try and pull from this other person because I know they're kind of backing away from me. So yeah, I think conflict is sort of necessary if you have a group of people who are all really passionate in going in the same direction, but they have different ideas of how to get there. You want them hashing those differences of opinions out because I think that's where the real value comes from. And so
let me go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say if there isn't conflict, if it's a silent room and one person's speaking, like there's just there's things getting shared that aren't in the open. And if there is conflict, at least you're putting in your best effort. I feel like, you're getting different opinions out on the table if there's conflict.
Because you're not afraid of the conflict or having tough, and the phrase I've used in coaching before is the tough conversation, right? You're not afraid of the tough conversation. If somebody's not pulling their weight, or you think there's a better strategy and tactic or a solution, or things aren't going well, whatever it is, I don't think you're afraid to have those conversations. Now, would that also, is it also safe to assume, because you kind of come from the not afraid of conflict or having tough conversations, that you would prefer to be in control? So I'm kind of circling back to this control ownership thing. So is it safe to draw a correlation between the two, from somebody that loves conflict? Because you didn't use the word loves. I think you said you like conflict, like you enjoy that, which I really wish I was more like that. But because of that, does that mean you want to also be in control?
Oh,
or do you like to be in conflict so the right solution gets brought up, even if it's not your own, right?
Yeah, it's so kind of funny. Let me see if I can say it in a way that fits these things together. I think for me, if I'm in control, it gives me confidence, and that confidence lets me, I think, enables me to open my mouth when I have a disagreement or feel a certain way. But I also think that part of being confident and part of being in control is feeling that you're right and not second guessing yourself. And so I think that just kind of puts you in this position where when someone else's idea comes up, your knee jerk is to disagree. And I think that's often my knee jerk is to disagree. I think some people too, just, I don't know if I think I just might be one of these kind of people whose knee jerk is to disagree. I mean, I don't know that it necessarily is tied to control, but I think if I disagree with someone, the chance that I open my mouth is probably based on how confident and how much in control I am of the situation. Like I might, if I'm not super confident, then I probably won't disagree. But if I'm in control of like a project or confident about a project, I'll throw my stuff out there, and if someone disagrees, usually I'll be like, well, no. But especially working in software where there's a lot of people, I think a lot of software developers are less likely to disagree. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's 50-50, but I do run into situations where there will be people who don't want to argue with me. And I think a skill that I've been working on is trying to figure out how to still pull them into the conversation and try and engage and try and bring that conflict forward. Because, they may not yell back at me, but even a small comment might be their version of a strong argument. And so like, I try to be sensitive to, the just the type of person I have a disagreement with, and really try and get their perspective, at least when I want more ideas on the table,
Yeah. So now now I'm going to really put this on a wrap now, because we talked initially about like ownership and how empowered that project you and I worked on, and how you felt about that. And maybe you were juiced up and you were left to just kind of run with it, take some directions, implement a strategy that you felt was appropriate for the team. But then there's also this, conflict and control and having this ownership, like all three of these, right? So now you have me thinking about how you handle situations where you don't have any ownership, right? Where it's not a client in the consulting world where you are told what to do and this is how it will be done. And you are, you don't feel like you own it. You can't have any conflict. They don't want to hear it. They're being told what you're saying. So you're not in control. Like all three of those things that maybe you got from this project that we did together. Now, that is not always the case in the consulting world. So I'm interested on how you feel and what solutions and how do you handle situations on the flip side of that?
Yeah. So, it's funny. I think usually what I have to do is, cause like, I can't just say no. I mean, I'm still there to work on the project, still there to try and deliver as best I can. It starts out with just, the choices I make are The question is who is in control then at that point? Because if somebody is in control, then really I'm just trying to cater to them. So I tend to go to them, ask them questions, and even if I think that I know what's best, or I know what's best, I know that because I'm not in control, the right thing to do is to bring a set of options to that person and let them choose the option. And so that's typically what I do. What I would have done if someone else sort of said, I'm in control of this project and you're going to do what I say. And then so so that's how I would answer the question.
Yeah. So and those projects, I mean, you have to be able. The one thing the word that I'm thinking about, and it was actually one of the pillars of our athletics of software, and a thing I do admire about you. And I had this conversation actually with my brother this weekend. So my brother, for those that listen, I talk about him every few episodes. He's a CTO and a VP here in town. And he's done very well in the IT space and continues to kind of crush it and all that. But we were just having a conversation about, I may have been talking about you, actually. I may have been talking about you in our conversation when we were talking about the athletics of software. We were talking about commitment. And we were talking really, I know we were talking about you because I remember this phrase came from you, that there are some people that are pros and they're the 96 Chicago Bulls, the best team ever, and they're all committed to the outcomes and their roles and to whatever winning is. And then there's the beer league, to steal a phrase from you. There's people that are just out to have a good time and, hey, we're going to have a few drinks, a few laughs, and I'm clocking in, clocking out, and all that. So we got this spectrum of, pros and a beer league. And my brother, and we were just talking about commitment, and we were talking really about how in the IT world that there's just not people on that side of the spectrum. There clearly are. But it's just not that many. Like it could be an 80-20 thing, right? But when I was talking about that and kind of this beer league, and now that I kind of hear you talking about the clients and kind of ownership and control and conflict and things like that, like nobody will ever misplace your commitment, right? And I think that's one thing I really admire about you, other than from what I've seen across the spectrum, not just with Polaris, because I think Polaris, we are all kind of in the committed pot of developing great software, quality software in a timely fashion. But like your level of commitment is, it's kind of off the charts in this world of software. It just really is. I mean, I guess where's that come? Is that just an intrinsic thing you have? Like, hey, I'm just going to kick ass at this and no matter what's going to happen, like, or is it kind of a thing where you push yourself to it, or is it just something, where does that level of commitment come in a profession where most people are not like that?
I think for me, I just really want to see, like there's sometimes moments in software where the person you're delivering for just is like, oh my God, I can't believe you, like this, the shock of what you're capable of as a fully committed team or fully committed person. It's like night and day. I mean, nobody, especially when it happens in a scenario where they're not expecting it and you're just like, you just blow people away. And it's for being a developer as long as I have, like, and to have those moments where you just really realize that you've made people's lives better. I mean, I don't know if there's a better way to describe it. Like, and you realize like, well, all I did was, I kept the deadline in sight. I kept what was important to the users in sight the whole time. And you can cut out a lot of crap by just doing that, by really driving hard towards the end goal. And I think, I don't know if that answers it. No,
it does, because I think the first thing you hit on was just about the value. No, it's the value that you give to people, right? It's easy to be committed. I'm not going to be, maybe this is a bad kind of metaphor analogy to it, but like being super excited about delivering software. And if that is your kind of your focus, maybe you could lose some juice on that and you just go project to project and you're building things. But when you really start with your mindset and having the front of your mind be about delivering value for people to make their jobs better and to make their jobs easier, to make them more efficient, and to have them know that they're going to be happier, and maybe they enjoy their work environment more, and maybe, you know, maybe that translates and trickles down to their personal life, right? And you feel like, shit, all I did was I fixed some software for him. I made quality software for him. So, I mean, that was kind of what I took. The first thing you said was, the first thing you seemed to say was, I'm impacting people. I'm not just building software.
Well, right. And I want to be clear too. I mean, it's not like, you know, I don't even remember from that feedback we got off that one project, but like someone was like, oh my God, this has everything. Like the expression of how much this person's life has changed. And, you know, one of the problems why developers don't get to see, let me back up a little bit as I ramble through some nonsense. So, I think there are a lot of developers who never even get to see the reaction of the people who use this software, like the real people who benefit from it. Like, you know, they might get a reaction from, you know, someone, you know, down the line, but the person who really gets that explosion of benefit, they never get to see or interact with. And I think that that's kind of a tragedy is, you know, where the praise happens, like the developer, whoever built it should be there. And I think that, you know, I've gotten lucky in a few situations, and I think that has really been the motivation to keep working like this, you know?
Yeah. Being able to have that at the front of it. Let me ask you this question, and hopefully our boss doesn't get mad with this. So I worked with somebody else, another Keith, when I first got involved with software, and I was just blown away with how smart he was and how good of a people person he was and how he could sit and just write code, right? You know, I keep thinking about this guy that, and it's probably not exactly how this happened, but I keep thinking about the guy that made Minecraft, of just kind of sitting on a couch writing Minecraft on some computer and turning that into $1 billion and all that. But I do kind of, my question is really this, like, you know, you're super passionate, super committed. You're unbelievably talented technically. Like and this is a phrase I've used on developers before. Like, you are as smart as the technology, and this is what I mean by that. There's nothing technically that I don't think you couldn't figure out. You put any sort of technology or stack, even if you don't know anything about it. I know that within a short amount of time that you would be as smart as the technology. You would figure that shit out, right? So, you know, people person, driven, passionate, committed, super bright in terms of all this. So I'm sitting around, and this is what I said to my buddy Keith, my other friend Keith. I'm like, if you're not 46 or 56 and a millionaire sitting on a beach just because you're so smart technically, then that's your own damn fault. Like, you just weren't, like, something just didn't happen, right? Like, you're like this full package, right? Does that drive you at all, like entrepreneurship or building apps or doing things in your spare time or writing the next Minecraft or doing all that? Or are you just so locked in on what we do at Polaris?
I mean, I guess that's, I don't know. I never really thought about it, I guess, that way. I'm pretty locked in on what we do at Polaris, I guess. I mean, I think, I feel like it's the direction I've been pushing for so long is to try and, you know, make a massive change in the way people think about working with consulting company. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
I don't, like, there's definitely been side projects where I've kind of tinkered around or thought, oh, you know, this might be a fun idea. But if I'm being really honest, I was just sort of like, you know, scratching an itch for something that I thought might be kind of fun. Like, I think that I'm most equipped to be an entrepreneur in the consulting space, like for what we do. I think that, you know, I've gone down some routes with building software technically where I'm just sort of like, I don't know, I see myself more of a tinkerer in that space. I haven't seen my, like, well, I mean, I haven't done this. I mean, otherwise I would be on a beach, you know, sipping a margarita, but so maybe it is, maybe I just need to look outside and solve a problem. But I don't think I've ever been the kind of person to just kind of like wander out into the open and be like, yes, there's a problem that I'm going to solve. You know, I sort of like, for me, the problem solving has always been sort of a collaborative spirit, where, you know, I sort of need the conflict. I need to engage people and challenge their ideas. And I think a lot of times, that collaborative shared experience is what exposes my value, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So people listening, typically we are definitely sport centered with our analogies and metaphors and things like that. And we definitely talk a lot about teams and leadership and all that. I'm interested, and now with Keith on, and hopefully Keith will come back on with us in the next week or so, and we'll kind of continue this. But Keith and our conversations will definitely be more slighted and slanted towards technology and software development. But I am interested, everything we've kind of talked about, and the things you've heard on this podcast. I mean, there's a phrase that if you're listening and you are not a software guy, there is a phrase that we use, or that we get hired to do, that is the Agile software development. And I do want us to kind of lock in a little bit on some Agile thoughts, right? And practices and things that you're learning with Agile, and we'll bring on some Agile guests as well here down the road. But what is Agile software development to you? What does that mean, and how does that let me ask you this: what is it to you? And then the second follow-up is, everything we've talked about up to this point, how does Agile play into all that of conflict and ownership and control and all that stuff that we've already talked about? How does Agile kind of mesh with all this?
Oh gosh, that's a big question, I think, because I think when people, the word Agile gets interpreted by so many different people in so many different ways, and for me, when I think of Agile, it's really just about trying to solve the problem as efficiently as possible. Because if you're not efficient with solving the problem, it's going to be more expensive, and however that expense plays out, it's not optimal. And it's for me, trying to be optimal, like following that path of trying to eliminate or trying to solve the problem efficiently, is what produced those exciting moments of delivering value, because so many people aren't thinking about delivering efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And
but that is it, right? I mean, I cut you off right there. I think that's a great definition of Agile software development, right? Just to knock something out as efficiently and with as much quality as possible. That's it, right?
Right.
I mean, I know that's not the textbook. I know it's not what they came up with, but that is what being a software guy in the Agile space is.
Right. I think the devil is in the word efficiently and what people think efficient means. And I think that, and so maybe I'm dodging a little bit by using that word, but that's okay. I mean, I think if we're going to keep talking about this, I do think that we should tease apart where Agile fits where and why, because it's very important to think about it. It's a thing that Agile is something that can easily be taken advantage of by different types of people in different types of positions. And so when you talk about what is Agile, it's important to piece those things apart, I think.
So on a very high level, because I do know after I asked that question, I was like, shit, that's a deep question, right? To figure out how ownership and control and conflict and all this plays into the Agile space. But on a high level, how does Agile intersect all that? Because as you were talking about that stuff 30 minutes ago, about kind of this Agile mindset on how conflict should be resolved, and and just kind of that whole process of building software with ownership and conflict and all that.
Right. Sure. So I think to me, it almost gets back to the athletics piece. So, so there is a team who's going to be like doing the delivery, and Agile has all of these ceremonies and techniques that team has the opportunity to take advantage of in order to become great at delivering software. And it may be that an organization comes in and says, okay, we're going to start doing these ceremonies. We're going to start, doing retros. We're going to have planning. We're going to do a daily stand-up. But what separates, so now let's say you've got Agile in place. Like, you really don't have Agile in place unless the team is actually committed and working. I mean, I'll throw out an analogy. I hope it works. I mean, bringing Agile to your organization is like setting up the weight room. But you got to come in there and lift weights. Like, you can't just have a weight room. You can't have a gym membership and call yourself, an athlete. Like, you have to go in and put in the work, and the commitment and control should drive what your workout looks like. If you're committed to delivering software every 2 weeks, you'll do it if you put in the work and put in the reps, as I think you've said before in this program. But I think that that's how I would look at it. I mean, all the greatest athletes, they committed themselves. I mean, they gave up a lot of things to be able to do what they can do. I mean, even if they were sort of genetically bestowed with some sort of, advantage, they still had to commit themselves to becoming what they eventually became. So,
what is,
I think,
go ahead.
Yeah.
No,
that was really all of it.
Yeah, no, I'm interested on your perspective on teams that, let's just call it a dysfunctional team. We could say it could be a dysfunctional Agile team. I don't think Agile solves everything, and I don't think there's a canned prescription for Agile. I think it takes an Agile coach or somebody with great insight and ability to evaluate and observe team dynamics. I think team dynamics is a huge part of Agile, and observing how teams kind of interact and connect with one another. But just to kind of blanket, what draws your eyes or mind or ears or your attention when you go observe a team for the first time that is quote unquote dysfunctional? What are you drawn to in the dysfunction that you would say, like, we've got to fix that. Like, we've got to start there, or they're not doing, and it could be software development. It could be like a pipeline. It could be DevOps. It could be how they release it. It could be how they groom things. It could be anything, or it could be how they set the ceremony, like whatever it is. Like what draws your attention on the dysfunction of a software team?
So usually in case people aren't familiar, there's sort of a stand-up every day where people talk about where the team gets together and sort of says, this is the plan for today, basically. Mm-hmm. That is usually the easiest place, because you can see who's talking to who and who's listening to who and who's responding to who. Nor on a dysfunctional team, usually all the communication is going to a single person. And the most dysfunctional teams are the single person being someone who can't deliver software, because the most difficult, most expensive piece of delivering software is writing the code. And and if the people writing the code aren't communicating with each other, you've got dysfunction. And so I think it kind of just I kind of piece it apart from there, like how apathetic the members on the team are, how much they're sitting back. What's really, assuming you're doing Scrum, towards the end of the sprint is a good time to pay attention to that stand up, because how many people really care about how close they are to the end of the sprint.
That's
so
really interesting.
Like that.
I really like that, actually, because this is what my mind's always going to shift to athletics. But I'm picturing this, and every coach that's out there that is in the athletic arena, when you start a practice, your daily practice, we're going to go for 2 hours. I've yet to see a practice where the coach does not pull everybody together and kind of talks about either something motivational, the theme of the day, the word of the day, and then they essentially sit there and have a stand-up. They sit there and talk about what we're going to do today, why it's important, how we're going to do it, and all that. And typically it is the coach, but it is interesting that in the software world, when you have a stand-up, or if it is it's not just Agile and it's not just software. I can picture sales teams getting together at 8 and 9 in the morning, and some director or sales manager getting everybody together and trying to rally the troops about what we're doing and how we're going to do it and how we did yesterday and what we can improve upon, all that sort of stuff. But you get that disengaged team, or you get the body language that sucks, or the guy that is on his phone the whole stinking time in a stand-up or in a sales meeting or whatever it is, that it's interesting. I've never thought about it that way. I think I could be led that way, and I would have maybe thought about it that way, but you pinpointed it right. That is the place where you really start to get a feel or a vibe for the energy and you use the word commitment, right? The commitment of the team. right? That's interesting because I think that is exactly, it's not. So I wanted to kind of position this to not just software. For the people that are listening, that's business. It's your exec board meeting, right? It's whatever daily stand-up type thing you have where people are engaged with one another, and maybe it's one person dominating it. So when you said it's all directed at one person, do you mean that like how it's the conversation is directed at a person, or one person dominates the conversation? What did you mean by that?
Oh, I mean, well, I guess usually I think it's both, but I think that in a more general sense, I'm looking for a single person who is sort of owning the project as opposed to everybody feeling like they own the project. And that's just one way, is by seeing a single person, because what they'll be is like, hey, where are we at this? Where are we on this? And they sort of run it from their own person. They're trying to accumulate knowledge for themselves so they can make a decision for the entire team, as opposed to all of the team kind of firing back and forth and collectively coming up with a decision of where things need to go. And it's not like, I don't want to throw a bunch of caveats. I think that is what I would do. How do you build the quickest way? Build that to where it's me, right? And I've painted a picture of me as a developer. I am not Keith Rogers or the other people we have in Polaris. That's fine, because that's not whom I'm trying to be. But if I were on the development team, how do you make somebody like me or a junior guy that is just starting, first couple weeks on the job, straight out of college or whatever it might be, right? Or somebody that just doesn't have the juice of you or somebody else, a senior level person. So how does that person feel that sense of connected or belonging or value or importance in those daily stand-ups? Well, I think you ask them more questions as opposed to telling them what to do. I mean, I think that getting their input, getting their ideas, and seeing how that works. I mean, I shouldn't say that you can do that forever for anybody. Like it's not like you every day are asking that junior or newer person things, but like I think you'd be surprised where if you do that a few times for a few weeks, they start expressing their opinion more quickly, and they start asking, hey, can I help out with this? I mean,
yeah.
And I think also maybe another part of that, and maybe better, I don't know, is reminding them of what's important as a whole regularly. You know what I mean? I mean, anybody can look at, so, if there's a list of things to do, even a junior can spot, hey, are we going to make this deadline? If maybe I'm trying to think of a non-software way to explain this, but in software, if you're trying to deliver a bunch of things in 2 weeks, if you're getting towards the end of that 2 weeks, maybe all of the senior people are so absorbed in what they're working on that they haven't noticed that they're running into trouble. I mean, even a junior person can recognize that, but like teaching them how to recognize danger when it's coming, I think is valuable, and maybe not even danger, but just like keeping the bigger picture in sight. You know what I mean?
Boy, I think this is actually big. This is the big pull. This is for me. Like, these are the things that juice me up, because Keith's not talking about software development. I mean, I really get juiced up about this, and this is my passion, right? Keith is talking. He is a software developer. We both are. That is our job, to be hired to release quality software, in a timely manner, right? But he's not talking about software. And this is the first thing I thought of, actually. Let me circle back around to an hour ago, right? When Keith picks up the phone and calls me to ask my opinion, or to give me to acknowledge me on some things, and how I've kind of ridden that wave a little bit for the past couple months, right? It's taken some guy that looks up to somebody else and is now part of the conversation. Like, all of a sudden I'm included and I belong, and Keith's making me feel valued and appreciated and all that. So your stand-ups, when you're sitting around and the junior guy or the guy that doesn't talk much or doesn't feel included or valuable, all of a sudden he's asked. He's not told. So that was very, very smart of how Keith worded that, right? It's not that you're being told what to do, but you're actually being asked your opinion, right? And so this is the first thing that popped into my head. And I love this story, and I may not get it 100% accurate. A former player of mine that played for me for 4 years, and I may have mentioned him before, is now the general manager for the Milwaukee Bucks. He's the GM. When he got hired as the he played for me for 4 years, and he was our 12th man for 4 years. Like, he didn't play much. And he's a whole nother podcast, and I'm trying to figure out a time where he can come on. He wants to come on the podcast, but he's a busy guy. He's in the NBA. He is the youngest general manager in the NBA, and his story is amazing. But I read an article in the Milwaukee Centennial or Journal or something about him, and the one thing about his name's John Horst. And the one thing they said about John in this that I really admire, and I knew him when he was 17. I recruited him. And I'm super proud of him. But the one thing this article said that really makes me proud of him is he goes around to everybody, regardless of title, position, salary, rank, or anything. And he asks for everybody's opinion about the roster, the draft, free agency, everything. And he expects everybody to have an opinion. And because he's built this, now that's how you build your culture. That's how you build your team. And that's how you build, all the connectedness and belonging and enthusiasm for the outcomes or for whatever your wins are. So John's built this culture where it is expected that you better be ready to contribute. And John is a GM in the NBA asking interns, like summer interns. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this contract? What do you think about him in free agency? What do you think about drafting him? And I'm sitting around and I read that and I'm like, one, I was super proud of him because that's how, and I know his heart and I know his intent and I know that is John, right? But that's the first thing I thought of when Keith was talking about, like, how do you do that? And it's really that simple. You just ask. Like, you ask their opinion, right? Or Keith picks up the phone and says, hey, George, what about this? Or, you did this and I want to acknowledge you for it. Like, shit, how hard is it to do that stuff, man? To make people feel included, right? And to make people feel valued, right? But I think, so everything Keith is saying right now is not software. If you're in a sales call right now and there's some 18-year-old intern, a friend of mine's at MasterCard and she had an intern all summer and just some young guy, right? How awesome would that be to be like 18, 20, 22 years old and work at like a MasterCard and have a summer and internship and have somebody that is very senior ask your opinion, right? Or ask what you think or how they can serve and help you. I just think that stuff, it's not software, Keith. And I really, I know it's simple. I know all that shit is simple, but it's so valuable that people don't understand how that changes the team. Right? Any team, software, athletic, sales, executives, it changes everything. Yeah, you said it. I mean, it's funny when you're talking about that. It was it kind of made me think of just like just challenging people to put their opinion and being open about other people's opinion. It made me think about something that I talk about a lot, which is I have a fraternal twin, and he's a pilot. And when he became a first officer, the captain just looked at him and said, I want you to act like I'm trying, or I want you to fly. I want you to basically make decisions as if I'm against you, as if I'm trying to do the wrong things. And so it forced my brother, who was new at that point, to question the more senior pilot. And I think that, like, there's nothing wrong as a junior with entering it in the mindset that I don't think what these guys know is right. Even if all you're doing is trying to put yourself in the mindset that I want to challenge these guys and I want to ask these guys questions. So I think that's another thing too for juniors, to, like, people who are new in an environment, like, you should go into it learning how to challenge and learning how to bring things up also, Yeah.
Where's that come from in you? Because I mean, it's for those that know Keith, like, and Keith said it, and it's not a criticism at all. Keith likes to argue, but I said this. Keith will argue this. My college roommate, and he writes up. He's from Milwaukee, and I think writes for the newspaper that I was referencing a little bit ago. And he actually writes for the USA Today, and is on the political side of things. And so you need to be opinionated. Like, you need to want to fight and argue and things like that. But I've never been around anybody that wanted to argue and battle. And like, every day was going to be a battle with my roommate in college, right? And he's a great guy. He's a phenomenal writer for the Milwaukee papers and the USA Today. but I'm not suggesting that he didn't argue in a classy way, because that's, I think, the phrase I've used with you before is like, you like to argue, but I don't think it's like to make me feel inferior or to make me feel stupid or anything. But you like to argue. Where's that come from? Like, where did that battle come? Do you like to win the debate? Do you want to be proved right? Do you want to learn more? Like, is that the thing? Like, do you want to argue in such a way like, hey, I'm going to challenge George on this because I'm going to get after him and I want to learn something from him? Or do I just want to prove my point?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think in some ways I think in some ways if I feel like someone says something and I don't think it's like the perfect answer, I'm like, well, I have to, I'll pick at it. I'll pick something that I think makes that answer not perfect. So I think it's just that I think it's more just almost the devil's advocate instinct to like want to just poke holes at things that that on the surface don't seem perfect. So I don't know that it's so much that I mean, I do want to be right. I like being right. I wish that I was right all the time, but
Right.
but too many times I get challenged and I'm like, oh, I'm definitely just wrong. And I think one thing that makes it easier for me to argue and not walk away with everyone just completely hating me is it's not really a reflection on me when I'm wrong. And I think that like that's one reason that I like to argue is I don't feel the pain of losing an argument, or I don't hurt other people to the point, like I don't argue to the point that I hurt other people, because it's just an argument. We're still the same people. It's not like, so I guess my point is like, it's easy for me to argue because I don't wrap it up in who I am. It's just, I want to try and get to the truth.
There it is. There it is.
Or a truth,
A truth, the truth, or a truth. That's it. Yeah. That's how I would take my perception of things. Like, of just being able to get it out there and like, let's have a debate. Like if we're going to talk about the 96 Bulls, like we can argue about it, but let's get to a truth or some greater level of understanding, whether that be software teams, athletics, Agile, whatever it is. I wanted to keep us locked into about an hour because I do know you're busy, as am I. First, I want to thank you for coming on. Keith has been super supportive of me. Like, Keith, I don't know if have we met each other? Have we actually been in the same room, shook hands? I'm not sure if we have.
No, I think we've been in the same room, but I don't think we shook hands. I went down to St. Louis for something a couple of years ago, but for whatever reason, didn't get a chance.
So so we're in the consulting world. I'm in St. Louis. We work for the same company. Keith's up in Chicago. I'm in St. Louis. We've worked on a number of projects together, and it's just one of those things. Like you just know, always be aware of who is celebrating with you, right? And who is supporting you and who's clapping for you when things go well. That's something I saw in all this personal development stuff that I'm into. Just always have your eyes open, and all the I don't say all the success. I mean, but the podcast and my development within Polaris and my development as a consultant and a developer and Agile coaching and things like that. Keith has been great in helping me develop and challenging me on things and questioning me on things and teaching me on different things. But more than anything, he's been a great supporter of me, which keeps me going, right? In a world where you feel like maybe you don't belong, right? I've said that before. I'm in the software world with people that, went to Ivy League schools and are super smart in terms of technology. And I still consider myself a basketball coach. And so, but Keith's always been super supportive of what I'm doing and where I'm going and what I'd like to accomplish. So I can't thank you enough for that, Keith.
Hey man, you're doing awesome. So
yeah, it's fun.
Keep up the good work,
Yeah. But we're hoping to have Keith back on. I want to get into more, we could do a weekly podcast. I'm not suggesting we are, but I think Keith will be on every once in a while, given his schedule and his work with clients. As talented as Keith is, you would also understand that his time is valuable within the clients that we have, but also within Polaris and the responsibilities he has. So when we can carve out time, we'll have him back on because there's Agile software development, how to build software, how to work as a team, and how to collaborate, and how to be a good consultant, and how to get the right answers, and how to how to have conflict that is positive is all part of it. And Keith has strong opinions on that I can learn from, and everybody else can learn from. So I look forward to having him back on. How can people track you down, Keith, if they're looking to connect with you? LinkedIn, Twitter?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, LinkedIn.
Okay, so when I release this, everybody go to the show notes. You'll be able to find. I'll get all of Keith's information on there, and everybody, a lot of what Keith was talking about today was definitely technical in nature, but it was not technical. Anybody, my buddy that coaches up in Chicago, there's stuff for him to take away as a basketball coach, right? Of just how to include people and ask people's opinion and to make people feel valued and appreciated and that they matter as part of the team unit and the outcomes that you're trying to get. So everybody get out of your cube and reach out to Keith and reach out to me if there's anything we can do, and reach out to Polaris if there's anything we can do to help you and how we can serve you. Thanks, and have a great rest of the week. Take care. Thanks, Keith.